know it's been a while. I wanted to definitely make sure that you knew I have not forgotten about you, but I've had certain questions about technical difficulties, and I hope you guys have the link that I linked to for how to settle those difficulties with the Q&A forum. Some people had difficulties or misunderstandings, I should say, with how the blog works. There's an RSS Atom feed. It's supposed to tell you exactly when it updates. However, there may not be an update every day. Sometimes there are updates, more than once a day. And that's basically what it looks like. You should be getting something in your email, or you should be getting a tab, an RSS Atom tab in your browser. That way, when you click on that tab, it shows you how the web page that you subscribe to is updating. So if you don't understand that, please take a look at RSS, really simple syndication, or Atom. Now, I have done quite a bit to change the way the Q&A forum works, so if you have the link to that, you should be able to find it either on the Q&A forum or the blog. Send me an email, a personal email, not necessarily a Google Groups email, to let me know that you're having trouble. I'm trying to sort certain things out. However, there are people who have been asking for help, and they're not actually stopping to read instructions. I'm a huge stickler for instructions. Please read the instructions. They'll kind of help out and reduce unnecessary questions where possible. Now, I told you that I wanted to come back to discussing certain issues with databasing. So we're still using H2, right? But what I want to talk to you guys about right now is backing up and recovering your data. Now, previously we talked about SQL files, and with the H2 database administration or database management system, there have been the script and run script commands. Now, each of the SQL, each management system that abides by the SQL standard set up by ISO should be capable of reading .SQL files. So I want to recap how we create those SQL files, but I also want to show you the other way of backing up and saving data or exporting them to other utilities. So there are two ways that we can do this. One is to create the .SQL files. Another one is to create the .CSV files. Those are for comma separated values, and they're compatible with things like Excel or Google Sheets or other spreadsheet software that use CSV. Also, you'll find that they're also compatible with things such as different software that helps you to keep track of monetary transactions. So just to recap, let me get you to that part of our backup and recovery system. So as usual, I'm going to be using H2. This is the latest one that was available at the time when class started up. This is the 1.4.200 jar. All right, so I'm going to double click the jar. And so now you'll see that I have this particular icon in front of me. If you're using Windows, it would be towards the bottom at that Windows platform dock that helps you to see what items you have running, right where you have usually the USB detection or the network options tab. All right, so here we go. I am using H2. I'm just going to sign in. It's going to be very simple. All right, like we always do. Let me just make sure I've blown this thing up. There we go. That way now everybody can read it. I will also be sending this, or I'll be loading it up online. So now let's just take a look at what I have. I have sales. I have product. Let's just take a look at what I have placed within these tables. So I'm going to select star from sales, All right. Now there's nothing in there right now. I'm going to have to create something that I know will have people in there. And I'm sure I could just back up and recover an empty table, but I think that a lot of this stuff, it becomes clearer when you have an actual data set to work on, because then you can see how things were backed up and recovered. All right, so here is one case of backing up and recovery. I can use this table. Let me just look for another table or two. All right, so let's see what we have. That one's a bit sparse, but it'll do, I suppose. Let's see what I did with product. By the way, a lot of the things that we put into our tables, the way we define our tables with our database, data manipulation language, data definition language, you're going to see how a lot of these things are also backed up and recovered when we use our scripts. So let's see if I have something on inventory. And if not, we'll just use those 2 or 3. All right. So there we have it. There you have inventory. The one that I had used previously, I didn't like how small things seemed, but I can throw it in for good measure. Select star from product. One selected. All right, so there we have just one line. So now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you the 2 ways that we do this. Now H2, they're going to have 2 major commands. By now you should be somewhat accustomed to how these commands work. What we're looking for in this case is actually going to be something called CSV read and CSV write. Now here's how we use them. Here you'll see that we have a function called call. Call tells us to invoke that expression right away. In other words, we're going to take the function and we're actually going to use it at the time of its supposed invocation, because a lot of times we may use functions that will only give us a transient or temporary outcome. What I want to be able to do is turn around and use it and then pull out from that particular function its final value, or you might say whatever functionality it performs. I want to be able to use that operation on the database management system itself. All right, so here is call. Call is one of the things we're going to have to use. And in addition to call, we're going to have to use also CSV read. All right, and also CSV write. Okay, so just in case you're wondering, and now I'm not going to say that each of these functions are guaranteed to be in one of your other database management systems, like say Postgres, MySQL, Oracle, and so forth. What I will say is that they do have their analogs or their equivalences. And what's important about knowing that they have their equivalences is that basically the tooling exists and the compatibility exists, all right? But at the same time, they may use a different sounding function call or a different means of perhaps invoking the compatibility with CSV. But overall, the ISO SQL standard has been updated over the years to accommodate some of these additional new features. So now let's just take a look at what they've given us here. I'm just going to blow this window up a bit more. All right, so here's the grammar. The grammar tells us that we have CSV read, and it's going to be the name of a file name. All right, and that's at the minimal part of what we could have. It can also be things like a string of columns and CSV options. Now, you may be wondering, why would we have that there? Well, sometimes we also have other ways of breaking up data. In comma-separated values, you have a comma that is used as a grammatical delimiter. What that means is that every time we encounter a comma, we know that some sort of field has ended and another field is about to begin. All right? So now, if you want to use tab-separated values, you would have to use CSV again, but then you would change the delimiter. All right? The delimiter would instead be an actual tab instead of our comma. So if you remember how that works from other classes, there are certain electronic keyboard combinations that will signal that you have a tab. And so knowing what those electronic combinations are, then you can actually say, you know, my delimiter is going to be this particular electronic combination. If you take a look at what we have down here, it says that we have call CSV read. There's a test.csv file, and they're going to read that file containing the columns, IDs, and so forth. All right. Now, if you also take a look at what we have here, this is what we're going to have to use ourselves. It says select star from CSV read. All right. Now, what that means is that we're going to have a CSV read file, CSV file. The CSV read function, however, is going to return what it is that we see. All right. So that might seem a bit awkward, but I'll show you how it works. Now, once we're done with that, this select star part, that allows us to make an actual legitimate SQL query out of it. And from there, if we use that select function, we can then throw that into a table definition or a table update, and that will allow us to once again transport the data from one file into the next, or I should say from one file into your table or database management system. Now, one thing I should probably point out to you is that CSV is not necessarily intelligent, so to speak. So some of the data types that we enter and pull out, they're going to be viewed as basically strings or characters. What we'll have to do then is, in order for us to get the actual data types that we want, we'll have to cast those particular columns and then start restructuring the table's definitions. All right. So now, let's suppose that I wanted to read and write a file. First, I'm going to use CSV write, and it's going to allow me to send that particular table into a CSV file. All right. So now, moving back, I'm going to go into my console, and here is a good thing for me to be able to use. Remember that select star from product wasn't very large. All right. So let's just use a very small example, and we're going to use that one. So CSV write, I'm going to then say what type of file I want it to be, but now I'm also going to populate it with a query. When I populate it with a query, I'm going to say that I want whatever resultant outcome from that query I receive to be the data that is recorded to that CSV file. All right. So moving back to my console, I already have this right here, select star from product. Now I'm going to use CSV write. Let me just put it all in caps. All right, and I'm going to want to send it to a file. Remember that I need to use single quotes. So this one is going to be called CSV product.csv. I'm going to put my comma here, space that out, close out my function. All right. And if you notice what we have down here, we also put the query in strings as well. All right. Now, fortunately, since I'm using comma separated values, they're instead going to use as their field separator a comma by default. All right. Now, when in doubt, you should use the following character set, UTF-8. This is the default character set for the internet. So even if you have different machines, you'll find that the character set will be compatible if I use UTF-8. A lot of machines will be able to read it without having things like certain garbage symbols that don't process or transfer over so well. It allows you to sidestep certain things like whether or not you have max symbol equivalent, or whether or not you're using like Romans or Windows, you know, that type of thing. I know that I want my characterization to be UTF-8. Okay, so I'm going to have my characterization. This field separator, this would be only if you are using tabs. Take a look, write a tab separated file. So that's for tab separated values. Okay, moving further on, let me just write in the remainder. So my CSV option, right, it's going to have my character set string, right? I want that to be my option that is explicit. So I'm going to use UTF-8 for that because I know it's highly compatible. If I knew I had to write a file that would be able to encode characters from around the world, I may try to use something like Unicode 16 or 32, UTF 16, 32, and so forth. But I'm going to be just fine using UTF-8. And so let's put that in and get ready to observe what happens next. All right. So here's what we're doing. I'm not putting in that field separator part. I'm just going to leave it as it is. Now, let's see what happens. Close that guy out. I'm going to select this one right here. Once selected, all right, so like I told you, they were expecting for me to use the word call. So the function is not going to work right away under this particular circumstance. I'm going to have to use the call function that will allow me to call the database's built-in functions. All right, and I'm going to apply it to the database itself. So here you have call CSV write, call CSV read. Now up here you're going to see that you don't always need to use call. We'll talk about what's going on there, but let's just get up and running and discuss it a little bit later. Alright, so there you have it. So now I've written a CSV file and I use character UTF-8, which means that this file should be compatible with a lot of machines as well as the default character set used on the internet worldwide. Now that I've created that, let's just take a look where it is on my file system. And here it is. Okay, so on my file system, I'm going to find it right where I put everything else for my database course. All right, here we have csv.csv. Let's take a look at what it looks like. I'm going to open it up. I'm just going to open it up with a plain text editor. And there you have it. So everything's written as a string right there. All right. Okay, so as you can see, it was written into the same directory that my h2 directory was written into. Now this is going to be local to whatever directory I say I'm working in at the time that I start up h2. All right. So now that I have that, here's what I want to do. I want to read it. So I'm going to say the following: select star from. And with this selection, I'm going to use CSV read. All right, that's what I have as my reverse process. So let's take a look at what we have down here. Notice how up here we had to call CSV read with the call specification, or the internal function, I should say. However, here when I use the select part, there's no need for that. So when CSV is being run as a function all by itself, then we use the call function. But now when it's not being run all by itself, it can actually be part of a subquery. So select star from, and then this whole thing will be our data set. All right, so let's take a look. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say call CSV read, because if I don't, take a look at what will happen. All right, yet another error. So they're expecting me to either use call or something else altogether. All right, so let me now try call. Let's see what happens. Now that I've called it, I'm doing just fine. I can actually read what I had placed in my CSV file by my database. So my database management system is allowing me to see the CSV file, all right? But this right here is not going to be stored anywhere. It just allows me to read. Now, let's suppose I wanted to create a table from it all. Let's just use the CSV read as a subquery, all right? So just going to use the select part. When selected, that's what I got. All right. Now, if I want to do the following, I can create something called product2. Create table. Product2 as. Now remember, there's a couple of ways for us to create a table or a database, things of that nature, based off of the fact that they are relational variables. So the one way to do it was to specify exactly what we want to define the table as, or how we want to define it given its different parameters. But the other way is to do it by having the outcome of a query be thrown in as its input. All right, so when we do that, we have the following. Let's just take a look at the grammar for the language. Create table. Right there. Here's the pathway that we're using. We have table name, but now we're not using what we normally use, the column names and the column definitions. Instead, we're going beyond that part all the way down to what we have here as a query. All right. So any legitimate SQL query can also serve as the input for our table's construction. If we wanted to, we could create a view. All right. And that too would have worked as query. So let's take a look. Let's suppose I wanted to take some data out. And right now I'm creating a table, product to as, and I'm going to throw in this guy right here. Boom. This is going to create a new table for me. Very interesting. I lost my network connection for a moment. Don't worry. Let me just copy this over before I forget. And I'm going to throw it into a plain text file. And I'm just going to call this guy right here CSV. Why do I keep calling it CVS? CSV workspace. All right. So now, let's see what we have. Okay, so CSV, the CSV that I was using to create a product to that table, it's now here. Let's take a look at what the fields look like. You're going to see a lot of characters. Variable character, variable character, variable character. So there's going to be something a little bit wrong with that. Namely, I'm going to have to go back and change the data types to match what they were before. Now what I had previously were things like real numbers, integers guaranteed not to be null, and also I had a variable character of size 30. All right, so that's one of my trade-offs. Now, if I wanted to create a view called product, it would actually be the same essentially. No problem. Let me disambiguate this part. All right. So now I have a view for products. But as you can see, that particular view right there, I'm not really wild about it because what it means basically is that I have this data that is stored kind of like a constant, but it doesn't properly match its data type. All right. So as you can see, this was one way for me to back up and recover data. Now, the only way for me to get this whole thing to match what it should have been is for me to actually change around the data types. All right, so that's going to require that I use a lot of alter table, alter column, and then start changing the column definitions. As you can see right here, alter table, alter column, that's what I would have to do. All right. Now, previously, we also spoke about the other way for us to back up and save our data. Talked about creating scripts. All right. Now, script and run script don't require me to, they're not going to require me to do things like change my data settings once they're imported. My tables are going to have the same data type. The values that I have are going to have the same values. And the way they do it is that you create a backup script that would be the equivalent necessary to recreate what you previously had in a brand new database table. All right. And once I do that, I'll be able to store it into another relational variable, not just a database, but also they associate this thing with schema. All right. So let's just take a look. Let's recap that. If you remember what we had before, I had select star from customer overview, select star from orders, select star from inventory. Let's suppose I have a very, very large task of perhaps transferring them all over. Well, remember that when we used CSV read, CSV write, what we had in that case was a way of being able to transfer material over, but it wasn't limited in what we could attempt to transfer. Let's just take a look. In this part right here, we have a file name string, and we also have the query string. All right. The query could have been a bunch of different things. The same way I can select from one table, I can select from two tables, no problem. However, whatever I use is going to have to be a query that is known to be legal. So any query that's known to be legal that will allow me to extract data from multiple tables, that's what I would have to use in order to be able to transfer over a lot of information from several different tables. Now remember I told you that the backup and recovery of CSV write and CSV read can be useful if I have to work with other applications such as Excel or Microsoft Money or QuickBooks or things of that nature. All right. So if I were to try and demonstrate that, let's suppose that I really did have, say, something in Excel that was directly related to, how can I put this? Directly related to data that was previously stored in a spreadsheet that had already a meaning associated with it. What I then do is that I'm able to use the CSV format to transfer from one application domain to another application domain, right? So when it comes to these types of things, you're going to have to actually think about what is best for you given the job at hand. So I'm going to open this guy up with LibreOffice. All right. And now they're asking me what am I using. Just going to drop down here for UTF-8. And I'm going to be separated by columns. If you take a look down here, you're going to have a preview of what your spreadsheet would look like. All right. So moving further down, just going to hit OK. All right, so now I have a spreadsheet that corresponds with my database table from before. Now, in the case of this particular file right here, I suppose I wanted to save it into a CSV file format. All right, I'm going to use File, I'm going to Save As. All right, now as you can see right here, same way I could have saved it as an Excel spreadsheet, I also have the possibility of being able to save it as comma separated values. So there is a way to link together heavy duty database management systems and data aggregation with everyday appliances or everyday office applications that are more human friendly on a layman's point of view. I won't actually be needing to save that. So it could have worked in the reverse direction where I originally had an SQL file. Where I originally had an Excel file, let me put it that way, or a spreadsheet file. And for my own part, knowing that I would have to transfer it over, I take that spreadsheet file and I convert it into comma separated values. That would then allow me to transfer it over into my database management system and then start to actually work with those values, assuming that programs like Excel and other spreadsheet types of software are not fully featured to handle the tasks that I am looking to use. So now, in the event that I really need to back up a lot of things very sensitively from one database management system to another, I'm going to have to do the following. All right, I have my H2 console. Here's what I want to do. So going back to my instructions, remember I showed you guys that there's something called script and run script. And you can kind of do this graphically from up here in your visual console. I prefer not to because not all of these graphical interfaces have the exact same way of working. I prefer to use the most widespread explanation of how to get these things running. So let me mansplain it. No, I'll be more accurate than that. Let me actually explain it for real. So going to my commands, notice I have script and I have run script. So script tells me that I want to take script is used for the actual intention of me wanting to take my database tables and to create a script that can be exported. That way, when I recover it later on in another database management system, I'll be just fine knowing that I have the same exact fields, the same exact tables, relational variables, and the data within them. So, if you remember, or even if you don't, let's do this. Here I have script. And I'm going to get down to the part that I know concerns me personally. This part here, I want to script into a particular file name. Now, I'm really not so concerned about the compression. You can use compression if you know you have a lot of data, all right? But let me just be straight up with you. When you compress data, there's always going to be a cost of compression and decompression. And the more compression you use, the more time it takes to decompress it. So it may make for faster downloads, but it won't necessarily allow you to um, use the data immediately until it's decompressed. Now, notice here I also have the character set that I want to use. I also have tables and table names and schema. Now, I'm going to explain schema a little bit further into the future, but let's just get started, all right? So, if you take a look at what we have down here, here they use something like script no data, no problem. Let me show you how it works when you actually do have data. So, I'm going to go into my H2 console. I'm going to run script. All right, that's the part that I want to use. Now I'm going to say that I want to script it into a particular file name. So, skipping these guys here, skipping this part right here, skipping this part right here. This part has to do with data management. There's different block sizes that characters can be, I guess you could say, fitted into. If you ever had to use something like DD or copy in Unix, you'll hear about block sizes more often. What I want to do is I want to script to a particular file name the following. So script to backup. This I'm going to quote. I'm going to call it backup script.sql. All right. And what I want to script there, after I use my character set string, because that's important to me, let me just do that really, really quickly. Now this part is just optional. UTF-8 again. All right. Next part. Here's what I'm going to put in. Take a look at this part right here. This is the part that concerns us. So I have table name. But remember what I told you about comma, dot, dot, dot. The ellipses mean that we can do something repeatedly, namely the previous item listed before the ellipse. So we can actually put in quite a few tables. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I want to put in table orders, table customer overview, and table inventory. So, table orders, comma, table overview, customer overview, comma, table inventory, And I'll even throw in product. Just like that. Alright, so here's what I'm going to do just to make it a little easier for us to comprehend in chronological order. Just going to cut and paste this guy right here. Alright, don't want it to be too confusing. Bringing him all the way down at the end. Pasting him right there. Let's take a look at our grammar. Alright, we're good to go. So, let's see what happens. Alright. Let me just double check to make sure that everything I did was appropriate. Scripting 2. I might have forgotten some punctuation along the way. Alright. So they're saying they expected an identifier after my table value. Did I leave out a comma by mistake? That could be possible. Could very well be possible. Inventory is right there. Have my customer overview right up here. Have my orders. Where did I put my orders? Orders is right here. Alright. Product is there. Well, let's try it in a very, very short and to the point type of script. Just making sure. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use it in the most simplest way possible. Then I'll build it back up. I'm just going to use table right there, product. Let's see what we get. Alright, so that one did not hurt so much. And if you want to take a look at what happens in the end, here, let me just show you exactly in my um, viewer, my system viewer, what it's going to look like. Here I'm going into database management. I called it backup.sql. Here we are, backup script.sql. All right. Now, if I open it with a text editor, you'll see what they did right here in that they had created a script that has the following: create user, if not exists, Mustang. Now that's not something I would normally put in my files. I should definitely let you guys know. When it comes to backing up and inserting SQL files, I know that for my own part, I usually have to go back and take out things that should not be there. For instance, I know that in another database, I may not have the exact same name. I may not have the exact same password, which is what they're encoding here. I may not have the exact same privileges, and the salt may differ. Some of you may be wondering, what does salt even mean? Well, normally when you sign into a protected system, there's going to be an encrypted hash code that takes your plain text password and it's going to turn it into something jumbled up like this thing right here. In order to keep hackers from detecting what your name is, they add even more jumbled up information at the end. That way, no one's going to know really where your password ends or begins. The machine is going to know how to pull that suffix out that's encrypted. And then, all things considered, you'll be able to sign in a bit more easily. But now here's what I would have to do normally if I wanted students to be able to take what I've done and start from scratch, or I guess you could say pick up where I left off. That's better than start from scratch. I'm going to take out this part right here. This is the login information. All right. Once I take out the login information, things are a bit better. Now, another thing I may have to do also, in certain cases, I may have to alter the data engine that things are saved as. All right. So let me just make a few adjustments. I'm going to save this guy as the following. I'll call him backup script 2. All right. So with that being said and done, I hit enter. I should take out the txt part. I'll go into my system's preferences and remove it. But this isn't the way you do it. Closing that guy out. Coming right in here. Get the info on this. And what I should do is as follows. Like that. I'm going to use SQL. Now it's truly an SQL file. And there you have it, backup script.2 or backup script 2. Sorry about that. Now, if you take a look at some of these other SQL files I have, you'll see that in other cases I've had much larger files, all right, that were exported. And that allows you to take what I have and throw it into your database management system without starting from scratch. Now in this case, this one was not altered too heavily. All right. Now let's go and take a look at what we had before. So here, let me just put in a couple more tables. I'm going to put in table inventory. Actually, I should be able to just take these guys here. All right. And let's see if this thing chokes. I'm going to call this backup script 3. And let's see what happens. All right. So, you should be able to see what's going on here. All right. Going to take out, let's see, this guy right here. And I'm just going to take out the parts that have the additional tables. And that worked just fine. So basically the error lies within using multiple tables within the scripting, how should I put it, within the various different scripting parameters. So here's what I'm going to do. Let's see. I'm going to take out the keyword table repeatedly, and let's just see if they will interpret it just a little bit differently. All right. What happens if I put in table orders, you might wonder. I'm going to put in backup script 4. And as you can see, everything worked just fine. All right. So here's the caveat. I'm going to take this guy out. Let's take a look down here. The keyword table and the table names part. All right. This guy should be separate from table name because it's multiple table names that you're putting in, not multiple terms of table name. That's important. Write that down, keep it in the back of your heads. So, in order to make this thing a little bit better and, well, in order to make it run, let's put it that way, here's what we're going to have to do. Take out the table key names. And all I have right there is that very first one. All right. Now, you'll notice something else. There was no mention to a view being within the backup script. Well, let's move beyond that. I'm just going to export and then import in a separate table. So this is what I want to use. I'm going to use it as backup script 5. All right. Like that. Let's take a look at what we get. All right. So there you have it. All 5 of them. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of them. All right. And now let's just take a look at what our backup file has to say. Here we go. Backup SQL. All right. So this is everything I had there, plus all the data that existed within it. So now for the recovery part. Here we go. I'm going to actually sign out of my current account. All right, and then I'm going to work with a different one. So what I need to do first, let me just make sure I got you taking these things out. This is where we left off previously. I'm going to throw that into the backup. And now here's what I'm going to do next. So after I sign out, this guy right here disconnects. All right. I'm then going to sign in as somebody else. So if you've seen my various database files, the way for me to get out of using the same file over and over again is by creating a new one. All right. Basically, here's where I'm working from previously, that particular database. So the only way for me to get around using that again and to import these things somewhere where they did not exist, well, here we go. I'm going to create a new table, or a new database, I should say. And this is going to be username Elric. And I'm going to have a password username, you guessed it, Elric. It's the easiest way to do things. Alright, so I have nothing in here. Nothing whatsoever. Now, importing files is going to be a bit different because, as you saw before, they have those different security types of measures where, you know, they might try to create a new user, things of that nature. I want to be able to skirt around that for obvious reasons. We don't know if there's going to be a new user who has the exact same permissions. All I know is that I want to transfer whatever data he had back to what I have. So I'm going to open this guy up. All right. And I'm going to not create a new user. Like that. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check everywhere else to make sure that everything I have written in here is just fine. As you can see, there are going to be certain comments throughout the database management system. That's well and good. We don't need to be too concerned about that. One thing I want to make sure is that there were no data engines that are incompatible with my current database management system. I'll show you what I mean by that in a few. But let me just save this. Okay. It's going to be 6. Backup script 6. Closing that out. Now I'm going to have to go and actually alter the file's permissions and file names. So let me just go into my get info part again. It's not .txt, but it's .sql. Yep, I want to use .sql. No problem. Now, working in the reverse direction, in many cases it won't be so difficult. The reason why is because if I work within the reverse direction, I'm going to notice that a lot of the parameters were created for me. Alright, so in the reverse direction, let me just blow this guy up a bit more. Alright, like that. I'm going to make sure that you can see me do this. Run script. Use my run script command. This is in a completely new database management account. And I'm going to run script from backup 6. Alright, so let me just get back to the account that I was showing you. There we go. Backup script 6. Like that. Semicolon. Now it's legit. Alright. I don't get why this thing keeps flagging its own keywords, but whatever. Run script. There we go. Let's see what we have. Okay, so I'm gonna have to like change this thing a bit. The reason why is because apparently some of the referential integrity I should have included certain other files. No big problem. So that's why I prefer to do this thing live. That way you can see exactly where problems may arise. Had I given you a bunch of perfect outtakes, who knows what you could have run into. Alright, so one of the things that I needed before was going to be the customer table. Let me just see if the customer table for its own part references anywhere else. No, it does not. So here's what I need to add in. Because if I don't add that in, then the referential integrity will be broken. So I got to add that in as well. Taking back our previous script that we had, the one that worked correctly last time we tried it was this guy here. I'm just going to call this backup script A. All right, so now, moving out of there, backup script A, right down here. I'm going to take out, once again, the login features. Then I'm going to go back to MA. I'm going to use LRIC again. All right. So now, run script. Backup script A. .sql. All right, so let me just take a look. They're claiming that I define things more than once. So just looking at what we have here, have inventory, orders, product, customer, customer overview. All right, so here's what I need to do. Here's why. So previously, the other tables were created. All right, I'm going to have to do the following. I'm going to use the if does not exist part. All right. Here I have customer overview, I have inventory, I have orders, I have product. That was from the previous time around when I attempted to make these particular files. All right. Now here's what I'm going to have to do. There's a create table statement. Let's revisit it together. I'm going to have to use if not exists. All right. So I'm actually going to alter this file just to make sure that I don't overwrite anything. All right. So create. They're using the cached part. Once I get down to table, before the table name comes up, I have to put in if not exists. All right. So here we go. Right there. Gonna caps it. If not exists. With an S at the end. Now, copy this guy over. and I'm going to put them in all of my create statements. Here's another one. If not exists. All right, that's for orders. Now, I need to add them in as well, other places where there may be a cached table. So I'm going to have to do that also for inventory. All right. Inventory is taken care of. Alter table orders. So orders is taken care of here. Inventory is taken care of right there. Three down. I have two more to go. The other two that I'm looking for are product, I believe. That was customer overview. Here is customer. Got to put that in. And here's product. So now we're good to go. Gonna save this. And the thing that's good about it all is that I like the fact that the SQL backup files are actually part of the script. That way you can go in and, you know, alter things if necessary, just to be able to back up and add things in properly. So now if I run the same script, let's see what we have. Okay, so now my constraints, that's the next part. Okay, so let's take a look at what they're complaining about. And I should make it clear that this can happen in just about any table you're using. So here they say the part about public product adding the constraint. Okay, so this is where customer overview was. This is where customer was. Moving further down, this is where order was. Inventory. Okay, so now I'm trying to segment out product. All right, and now here's what they're saying. So here for public.customer, they added the constraint, all right, for primary key of customer. But now if we take a look at what we have here, we created product. Going down to this new part, alter table public product add constraint. All right, that's the part I need to take care of next. So in my alter commands, remember this is part of our data definition language. So now here's what I need to do. Here I have alter table, table name, add constraint. All right. Now there are a couple of items or options that I can use, but I'm gonna have to be very wise about how I do it. Now I can use check or no check, and that usually has to do with you being able to see at the time of entry whether certain items should be held to immediately upon entry or whether you don't check them. All right. Now here I have also the if exists clause. All right. That's asking you basically if the table does or does not exist. All right. Now let's see. If I come down here, I don't really want to alter my constraints, and I could drop them and bring them back, but I don't want to drop them and bring them back, and the reason why is because it's not very, how can I say this, it wouldn't be a very practical thing to do if we were working with like big data. So I want to make sure that what we're doing here is practical. Okay, so the column name does not have to be changed. The constraint, I don't want to drop it. I would actually prefer to, how can I put this? I would prefer to instead alter the constraint or modify the instruction leading into the constraint. Right? That's going to be the part that's best. So let's take a look. If I have to change the constraint, I don't want to drop it. I have to alter it. And here are my options. The particular constraint in question was the primary key. All right. It stands to reason that I'm going to have the same issues for all of the other primary keys. All right. So if I wanted to alter my primary key name, here's what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to alter my constraint, but there's more than one command for that. All right. And that command would be, let's just see. There should be one for adding the primary key, but there may not be one yet. All right. So here we are. All right, so here's what I need to do. I'm gonna have to check to see if the column actually exists, right? If it does not exist, then I'm gonna add this whole thing in, add column. column name, column definition. I'm going to say add if not exists. Column name, the column definition, and then beyond that, I'm going to have to then try to make sure that this whole thing holds properly, because it's not the column that's the problem. It is actually whether or not the constraint is being applied that is the problem. All right. So now, here's what I can do. Let's suppose that I had to go back and try it again. The fastest way out of this, assuming you can do this, I'm not saying that in a production environment you always will be able to. The fastest way for me to do this is as follows. I'm going to come into here, all right, and I'm going to drop all 4 of these tables, all right. So drop table. Let's see what my drop table command is going to look like. I may be able to drop them all. There is a such thing as dropping databases, but you got to remember that we have to make this whole thing fit properly. So let's suppose I had many of databases and many of tables. It would be very, very scary if I just tried to drop everything and then by mistake deleted things that were not part of the backup and recovery process. All right. So I'm going to say drop table, table name, and now I'm going to use this comma part to like get rid of the additional tables that are affected. So here's what I need to use. I'm going to have to drop customer overview. I'm also going to have to drop inventory. Product and orders. All right. I thought I had dropped customer as well. 1 second. All right, now, starting from scratch again, and it's a good thing I can do it in this particular context. That is one way to kind of cut things out, and then knowing that the entire table and its alterations are still in the script file, I can then use a second iteration as a drop-in replacement for what happened previously. So, just going to run script again. I'm going to be running it from backup SQL all right, throw that semicolon in there. Thought I quoted that part. I'm sorry. Let me do that again. There we go. And now all appears well. Now, let me just get rid of that part. I should have put it in backup script A. So I'm just going to drop product and do this again. Shouldn't take long. If I come up here to hit run, everything is going to run. Alright, so I dropped and then I created the run script command. So here I have customer overview, inventory, orders, products. If you take a look at what we have here, this is going to be worlds apart from CSV. I have my original data types, that's a good thing. I have my original primary key, that's a good thing. Alright, in that case I had previously product ID as my primary key. I have orders, take a look. My indices are the same. I have my two foreign keys, my primary key. Alright. So now I have my drop-in replacement for a recovered database from another database management system. Alright. Now, so these are two ways of backing up and recovering. One is CSV, and the other one is the SQL files. Now, one thing I would like you to know is that it won't always be this particular function on other database management systems. I think you should know that. MySQL has something called a load command. Now the load command allows you to load large amounts of data from elsewhere. Let me just blow this one up for you. Here I have load data. It's going to read rows from a text file into a table at a very high speed. This is a lot like insert or select into, but it's literally meant to actually allow you to insert a lot of data in one shot. All right. There's also different ways of importing data, but depending on which database management system, you're going to have a different approach depending on what their included functions look like. But what I do want you to take away from this is that as long as you're using CSV files or .SQL files, they're going to support those files. So, taking a very good look at SQL Backup and Recovery. All right, so there are different files that you'll be able to load into your database. All right, and given these different tools, you'll be able to do things like take things off of, say, an internet interface, plain text files, SQL files, CSV files, file systems. You'll be able to also, to a certain degree, take out or replace data that has been found on a file system. There are a few other conventions that they've become common across the different database management systems, but the means by which they are these things are executed may differ from one management system to the next. And that's just, it comes with the territory of whichever database management system you're using. So one thing you should always do is actually check to see which of your database management systems functions correspond to what you're looking for. If, for instance, I wanted to back up using MySQL, as you can see, there are ways of using Unix-like commands to redirect output into certain areas. Now, redirecting input and output, that usually goes into a territory I don't want to discuss with SQL, because I find that a lot of the input and output commands, they easily overlap with things such as system administration for Unix and Linux, and that would only, for people who are not versed in it, it could lead to a more complex scenario in which, if you put the tough stuff ahead of the doable stuff, you'll probably find yourself being a little bit more faint at heart, trying to um, load different types of parameters into your system, and perhaps even going so far as to mistake the complexity and difficulty of different tasks. All right. But one thing you should be on the lookout for, and I'll point this out also in the database reference manual that I had given you at the beginning of our session together. There's going to be a way for you to use certain features of your specific database management system to be able to run those functions that correspond to script and run script. All right. Here we have the case of an SQL file that is written on a person's actual file system. All right. When you load SQL into your database management system, when you load the database management system of SQL, MySQL, into your operating system, you're going to use subdirectories such as temp, var, sometimes OPT, and things of that nature. All right. But now, one thing you should be on the lookout for, what I told you about in our particular files, was that you should definitely be on the lookout for storage engines, because when you have storage engines that have a different way of managing and manipulating data, things won't carry over so well unless the two database management systems are compatible or related. So if it were the difference between MySQL and MariaDB, I'd say go for it. If you take a look at what we have here, this picture right here, I'll blow it up so you can take a look at it. In this particular part right here, as you can see, here's a script written. Notice how down here they talk about engine being equal to a certain value. NODB is one of MySQL's data engines. There are some others, MyISAM and so forth. So this is going to be very, very important with you knowing whether or not what you're receiving is compatible with the data engine you are using in your database management system. All right. There'll be more examples, and I'm going to discuss them with you. But for now, I guess you've been through quite a bit. So I'll be loading up some files that you can import and practice exporting with. And then there's also the matter of what I put on the Dropbox with the final exam questions that are, many of them will actually make reference to this thing here. All right. So thank you for giving me your time. And now on to some other matters at hand, namely the remainder of your work. So please make sure you're keeping up with the blog, keeping up with the MySQL playlist on the Code.Imitating Life channel, Code Imitating Life, and also keep up with the Q&A forums. I look forward to hearing your questions, and I look forward to also answering them. All right. Thanks again. We'll talk once more. Signing out for now. Goodbye.